Hello everyone. I'm getting things together so we can get our Science Saturday going. Let me see, make certain we're live everywhere. Let me see if we're on YouTube. Let me see. Yep, we're on YouTube. Let me make certain we're on Periscope. I just run through all these checks to make certain. Let me get Facebook going. All right. Okay, so we're on Periscope, we're on YouTube, we're on Facebook. Let me check out Twitch. Hello, good morning. And we are on Twitch. Alrighty. Okie dokie. You're having severe science withdrawals. Okie dokie. Well, you know what? Hopefully we can fix that. My hair is a bit floofy today. It's a bit humid where I'm at, so. And I'm wearing my headphones, which pushes everything forward on my face. So today's topic, we are dealing with cancer. It's not necessarily a particularly happy topic, but the thing is we absolutely need to make certain we understand everything associated with this particular disease, because it's highly complicated for, well, it's complicated and at the same time it's kind of not. So it's important for us to kind of get a general idea of what it's about. So what I thought I would do today is talk about, because I've done cancer research. I've done quite a bit of cancer research. As long as my hair is right, it looks awesome. It's so floofy. That's a word that I use a lot for my hair. It has its own personality. So when I wash it and I brush it out and I put product in, I just cross my fingers and I'm like, okay, do your thing, hair. So cancer. I decided to go with this topic because it's won like second place for almost every single poll for a month. And so I thought, and sometimes what I do is I'm just like, okay, it's a very close, win on a lot of the polls. So I thought I would go ahead and just talk about cancer. And I have a publication associated with this particular topic in regards to detection. And so what are we going to talk about today in regards to cancer? Well, we'll talk about a lot of things, but let's go ahead and get started. So that's my really cool intro made by Peter, also known as Gonna Go For It. So today on cancer, what are we going to talk about? Well, we're going to talk about what is it? What is this thing called cancer? How does it happen? What are the different types associated with it? The risk factors, treatments. How do we prevent this from happening? So we're going to talk about all these different things. Cancer, a lot of people have a misconception about it, and they don't quite understand how it happens. And there's several different types, and certain types are harder to treat than others. And I'll talk a little bit about that. And those tend to be the rare types. Usually, the rare types are the harder ones to treat because it's rare, so there's not as much information associated with that. Hello everyone, hello, welcome, welcome, welcome. So today we're talking about cancer, as they say in Deadpool. So what is this thing called cancer? Well, essentially what we're dealing with in regard to cancer are cells that have forgotten how to do their job. All right, so they're cells that have been genetically mutated so much to the point that they no longer function. So let's say you have lung cells. Lung cells do lung things. Well, if you have genetic mutations that happen inside your lung cells to where they no longer do what they're supposed to do, you have a cell that's forgotten its job. It doesn't know what to do because the DNA has been modified. It's also uncontrolled growth. So not only do these cells no longer know what they're supposed to do, they're just dividing and dividing, and they're growing and they're growing, and they kind of crowd out those healthy cells, and that's what leads to death. It's also can be seen as a failure of the immune system because technically speaking, your immune system takes out cells all the time that forget what they do. We all have cells sometimes that can get mutated and then they just don't function like they're supposed to. Your T cells come along and they go pow, and then they put a cap in that and they handle it. So your cancer cells are, to a degree, a failure of the immune system to kind of take them out. And also, something that's integral to cancer survival is that it rescues itself. I'm going to talk a bit about what we call apoptosis. This is what we call cellular rescue. And so cancer cells, they're self-rescuing princesses, but they're the toxic ones. They're just really awful ones. They're constantly preventing themselves from undergoing what we call programmed cellular death, to where your cells are supposed to just kill themselves if they no longer function properly. Normal cells do this. Hello, good day everyone. Owen, Bo, and Lone Wolf. Hope you guys are doing well. All right, so how does cancer happen? Well, you can have DNA changes that cause rapid growth and division. They override the self-destruct sequence that normal cells usually have, and they kind of trick the immune system. So, I've talked about in the past, allergies. We talked about allergies in a previous episode of the Science of. So anything that has a protein signature tends to trigger the immune system to attack it. That's why some people have cold-like symptoms, because their immune system, when they're experiencing a lot of pollen, what happens is your immune system says, hey, this isn't one of us, and it attacks it. Well, normally, the immune system will go in and it'll attack anything that has that type of protein signature on it that it doesn't recognize. So cancer cells can trick the immune system into thinking that it's okay. So this is an inherently problematic property associated with cancer cells in that they can indeed communicate to a degree with T cells and convince T cells, oh, we are all right. Don't worry about us. We're not crazy or, problematic or anything like that. We're just doing our thing, hanging out here. Pay no attention to the man behind the screen. That's kind of how it is. So, hello everyone. So, let's talk a bit more about that. So I kind of want to, because there's new treatments that are kind of working towards that. And so I need to make certain everybody understands this particular aspect of the science. So when I show you all the cool stuff that's happening, you'll be like, wow. Just like I was, and I actually have a video for you today. And I used to show it to my high school students. And I cry a little bit when I watch this video because it melts my heart. And you'll see why too. So what happens is anytime DNA changes, so during the cell division process, sometimes you can have errors in the DNA replication, because whenever cells make copies of themselves, of course they have to copy the DNA. So sometimes you can run into issues where that DNA isn't copied properly. Well, anytime DNA changes, so if you're also exposed to excessive amounts of UV radiation, standard radiation, carcinogens like smoking or asbestos, cancer-causing chemicals or cancer-causing agents, you run the risk of having your DNA changed in whatever cells are exposed to it. And so once that happens, there's also a risk of your cell forgetting how to do its job because those genes could be altered or shut off. So if you have a liver cell that gets mutated to the point that it no longer functions as a liver cell, but as a cell that with the functions of metabolism, so essentially eat, grow, divide, and self-preserve. That's kind of what cancer is. It no longer functions to do a job that's beneficial towards the organism. Like a liver cell, it doesn't really do liver cell things anymore. It just takes in all of this sugar and metabolizes, it grows, it divides, and it's constantly self-rescuing and self-preserving, and it crowds out all of the other healthy cells. Normally, you have T cells in your immune system that take out such cells. We all likely have had a cell or two or 3 or 4 or 100 that have forgotten their jobs. But there are fail-safes in place to keep you from developing cancer. Your immune system is one, and programmed self-destruct sequence in your cells is another. So let's get into a bit of that. Hello. If you're just joining, that's okay. That's okay. So I'm going to show you a really kind of cool graphic here. So what we have here, T cells attacking cancer. Woohoo! So here's a little bit. Now I imagine the color was added just for dramatic effect, but it's still kind of cool. So your immune system has a role in recognizing foreign cells and proteins in order to protect you. If a cell cannot communicate with a T cell via cell receptors and biochemical interactions on that level, the T cell can cause the cancer cell to die. It and others can go in and hop in on it and start introducing various, and they fire off the receptors on the outside of the cancer cell that initiate that programmed cellular death. So T cells can initiate that. But if the cancer is a particularly aggressive strain that undergoes a lot of self-rescuing, rescues itself from that process, that makes T cells work a bit harder too. So sometimes T cells are tricked. Sometimes cancer can trick them into thinking it's still a viable cell. And if the cancer cell can communicate somehow that it's not a problem cell, the T cells don't really attack it. Even if the T cells go to attack it, sometimes that cancer cell has a lot of a high of a expression of a certain receptor. If those receptors are fired off, it kind of prevents the apoptosis from happening. So for instance, if you're into like a particular type of card game where somebody says, I'm dropping, and you know, it's like the role-playing games like Magic the Gathering or something, I'm dropping this and I'm using all this mana and I'm going to blast you with this. And they're like, hold on now, I have this card that prevents everything that you just did. That's cancer cells. They have one particular receptor called an LPA2 receptor that's on the outside of the cancer cell. And so it's able to pull in all of these different types, all of this LPA, which is lysophosphatidic acid. It's able to pull in that particular chemical that fires off on the inside of the cell, preventing it from undergoing apoptosis. So sometimes the T cells may be doing their job, but the cancer cell can still cause itself to be rescued. So that we see that a lot in particularly aggressive strains of cancer. So cancer's a bit of a jerk. Cancer's a little bit of a jerk here. So let's talk about what happens in healthy cells. Now this may take you in flashbacks to high school biology and you're like, oh my gosh, the cell cycle. I've got a graphic here that comes from a textbook known as Cell Biology. And what we have here are 4 checkpoints in the cell cycle. So in a normal cell, when it's undergoing mitosis, you have several different stop points to where the cell checks and makes certain that everything is okay. Cancer can override the self-destruct sequences during cell division. So as I mentioned, we have these 4 stop points where when you're starting G1, after G1, You have a stop point that looks for damaged DNA. And you're like, is the DNA all right? If it's okay, fantastic. We can start making copies. And so we go into S. S means synthesis. So we're going through this. G means growth. Isn't that hard? Not really. So you have growth 1. Then you have synthesis phase, where DNA is making copies of itself to get ready to divide into 2 cells. All normal cells do this. And then there's a checkpoint. Hold on. Is there any DNA that's not replicated? Is it damaged? We all right? We're all right. That's a go. Then it goes on to the second growth phase. And then there's a stop point again. That's like, okay, is the DNA all right? DNA is all right. Fantastic. We can go on to mitosis and go through and divide. And at the end of mitosis, right before they divide into 2 new cells, there is yet another stop point where normal cells are like, okay, is everything aligned where each cell is going to get the same amount of DNA? Great, fantastic. Then it finishes mitosis and then the process starts all over again. This is normal cells. Cancer cells do not have those checkpoints. And what happens is in a normal cell, if at any one of those stop checkpoints something's wrong, they go, initiate self-destruct sequence. So that tends to be what happens. Then they go, red alert, red alert. Something is wrong with the cell. There's mutations, errors, chromosomes. We have to undergo self-destruct sequence. And that's when everything, we hear the like in Star Trek. And then they're like, everybody, self-destruct, time to go. So that's usually what happens in a normal cell. But that doesn't happen in a cancer cell. It just keeps going and going and going and going. So how does that happen? How is it that cancer cells bypass and override the self-destruct sequence? There's a thing for that. We have something in our particular, in our cells called tumor suppressor genes. You have entire genes that are in place to stop that from happening. So, oh, okay, there was a comment. You've posted a question on my Ask a Scientist channel on Discord. Fantastic. I will check that out. For whatever reason, my Discord questions are not popping up on here. Oh, you did it on Ask a Scientist. Okay. I will check out Discord. And if you don't know, I do have a Discord, and that's probably one of the easiest ways to interact with me and send me questions and stuff is on my Discord. And if you want an invite, there's one right over there in the chat, and I'll pop that up here in a second. So let's talk about something called the tumor suppressor genes. You actually have genes that help you stop from getting cancer. Some people don't know that, and I think it's a really cool thing, and it's important that we understand the dialogue associated with this. So tumor suppressor genes regulate a cell's growth. It prevents, they prevent a cell from growing uncontrollably and crowding out other cells. You get 2 copies of this particular gene. Isn't that fantastic? Not 1, but 2. And you get them from your mom, one from your mom and one from your dad. Now, if one of these genes gets shut off, let's say you get exposed to a carcinogen. One of these genes gets shut off, guess what? You got a backup. You got the other one, either from mom or dad. So let's say dad's gets shut off, you got the backup from mom. Now, this is what we call pre-cancer. It's not full-blown cancer, and there's a way to detect that, especially through certain type of tests. Pre-cancer still sounds scary, but the thing is, it's not full-blown cancer, and there's treatments to do for that, to where they can either remove those cells, like, guess what? It's not uncontrolled growth and crazy yet. We can pull these out, and it's fine. If both get shut off, that's when the brakes are gone, and you got the full-blown cancer going on there. You've got active oncode genes. Those genes are the things that cause the cancer. So, if you shut off one, that's okay. You can get checked out. They usually can handle that pretty quickly. They both get shut off. That's when you have the uncontrolled growth and the bypass of all of those important little checkpoints in the cell cycle. So, yeah, there's the invite to the Discord. You can pop up over there and check it out. So the things that are going on, I want to talk a little bit more about this because this is actually something that's been part of my field in the past. All right. So if you noticed, it took me a little while to get through all of the explanations of the stop points for the cell cycle. Well, normal cells take a long time to grow and develop because of all of the checkpoints associated with that cellular division. Cancer cells do not have those checkpoints to stop them from growing and crowding out healthy cells. They also have a high amount of cell receptors that allow them to utilize various chemicals in the body to keep them from undergoing that self-destruct sequence. LPA, lysophosphatidic acid. They have certain aggressive breast cancers have a high expression of that LPA2 receptor. Those are constantly firing off from interacting with LPA, and that causes that cell to constantly stay alive. They are constantly saving themselves from cell death. And so let's take a look at healthy cells versus cancer cells. So I'm going to show you, we have pictures here. On the left are normal cells, and on the right are cancer cells. So by day 4, we could have about 100 cancer cells to about 4 normal cells. And so with particularly aggressive strains of cancer that grow rapidly, you can see a decline with individuals who have certain stages of cancer. So one thing that is important to note, cancer itself as a whole doesn't actually kill you as an individual cell. There's nothing in it that's poisonous or toxic or something like that. There's nothing inherently poisonous or venom. It's not poison. And so there's a lot of misconceptions like cancer is full of toxins and evil, and it kills all these cells. It's not actively going out and necessarily killing cells. It can convert healthy cells into cancer cells. So it can do that through what we call exosomes, little vesicles. Those are packages that cancer cells can release. Now, if normal cells uptake these particular exosomes, it doesn't always happen, but they can be converted to cancer cells. So ultimately, what causes a person to lose their life from cancer is that this growth is so rapid that it crowds out all of the healthy cells, all of the normal cells, and if it converts any of those other cells, metastasis, yes, if it converts any of those other healthy cells to cancer, all it's really doing is sucking up resources, and it's killing off an individual in that regard, causing just these masses to eat up all of the food, all of the oxygen, to take all of these resources. So it's also important to note, if your cancer cells have a blood supply, that makes it inherently dangerous, because then that gives it access to other parts of your body. And it means it's getting even more resources. And so you might have a tumor that's benign, a mass of cells, a mass of cells that have forgotten their job. Sometimes we get a weird mole or something, but it may not necessarily have its own blood supply. So it may not be inherently dangerous. And that's what kind of makes it benign. It's not actively trying to spread. It's not actively trying to recruit other cells. It's just there, hanging out, not really doing anything other than maybe getting larger, but it's not actively crowding out other cells. So it's important to note that if your cancer has a blood supply or your tumor has a blood supply, that's going to be a big indicator on whether or not it's going to try to spread. But I kind of thought this was a cool little animated GIF that I wanted to show you. All right. So hold on, wait, sorry. Let me go back. All right, so cancer divides rapidly. It does not check for DNA mutations. It just keeps going and continues to become an unrecognizable cell. So like in the colon and brain, you can have cancer of the colon, but the colon, it depends on where the cancer is. You could have polyps there that don't actually do anything, but they do increase your risk for cancer if they're not addressed. The brain has its, the brain is a harder bear to deal with because it's hard to treat brain type of cancer because of the fact of where it's located. You have the blood-brain barrier you have to overcome, and certain drugs can't get through that blood-brain barrier. Then you run the risk if you were to do surgery, depending on where the tumor is, that can pose a problem because there's certain areas of the brain that are hard to get to without causing some kind of awful brain damage. So it's being an inoperable tumor, they can't get to it. So there's a lot of different issues with brain type of cancer, but they're trying to look at, and I'll talk about new treatments here in a minute. There's some new exciting treatments, especially with rewiring immune cells to go and attack cancer. And I'm going to show you guys an early video of some of the of the research that was kind of starting out, leading towards that direction. And there are actual human trials now going on for a similar type of treatment where you're going through and reprogramming T cells to directly attack a person's cancer. Let's talk about the types of cancer, since we're talking about brain and colon and stuff. Well, we have pretty much 3 specific types of cancers. Oh, I'm so sorry about reminding you about your father passing away from cancer. It's a hard thing to deal with, especially if you're a person who's suffering from that, because you kind of feel a bit powerless in the situation. All you can do is follow with what the doctors say, go for clinical trials that are available if you can, and kind of see what happens. It's not a fun disease at all. And it takes a lot of people's lives, depending on how far in the type of cancer. So if you hear the term epithelial cancer, that is the most common. They're called carcinomas, and that's about 80 to 90% of cancers. So things that have to do with like skin type of tissue, lining tissue. So your lung tissue is very similar texture to like your breast tissue or your skin tissue or your colon tissue. Linings of organs, those are all epithelial, and that's the type of cell. And you have various types of cells. You have blood cells, you have immune cells, you have epithelial cells, you have muscle cells, you have bone cells. So you have all kinds of different cells that have different functions throughout your body. Epithelial is like the skin type of stuff, the lining type of stuff, and that tends to be the most common form of cancer, and those are called carcinomas. Blood and lymph systems, that's your blood cells, your immune cells, these sorts of things. They're about 7% of cancers, so they're not considered entirely common, not as much as like epithelial. So those are a little bit rare, but there's a lot of different treatments associated with that. And then you have connective tissue. Connective tissues are called sarcomas. So blood and lymph, that's your leukemia and lymphoma. Epithelial are carcinomas. Bone and muscle cancers are sarcomas. Those are connective tissues, things that connect parts of your body. That's how you can kind of remember that. Bones connect parts of your body. Tendons, muscles, connective tissues, those are called sarcomas. Now, other cells tend to be exceedingly rare, and so there may not be as many treatments for the particularly rare cancers because the others are so overwhelming as it is. You know, breast, skin, colon, lung. I mean, we've got all of these other type of epithelial. That tends to be a heavy focus because those are the most common. Blood and lymph, we tend to see like in younger children. So we have organizations like St. Jude who work a lot with childhood cancers to kind of fill that gap. And they share everything that they find with the world, which I find to be amazing. They don't just lock it up and shove it in a safe. They're a nonprofit organization, and they're working to eradicate childhood cancer. And so they share what they find with the rest of the world, which is amazing. So when you see here, this particular picture, this person has epithelial cancer, cancer of the, esophageal cancer. And the esophagus, the inside all the way down to your stomach, that's a lining, so that would be a type of epithelial cancer because of the type of cells there. And this is actually a PET scan. If you're not familiar with PET, this is where they inject radioactive drugs, and cells will actually the cancer cells will actually suck it up, and then they emit beta particles, and then they're able to detect these beta particles through antiparticle collisions, and then that releases kind of like gamma radiation, but it's not anything that's inherently harmful. But they inject this into a patient, cancer cells are going to uptake it a lot quicker, and then they're able to see where the cancer is and if it's spread. So that's actually pretty cool technology, and it's far more accurate than CT scans. Just so you know, that's a thing that's actually pretty cool. Radioactive stuff. Okay, so here we go. I wanted to talk a little bit about what the risk factors are, because some people are just like, what are the risks? What are the things that can happen? So I've got a whole lot of them here. I'm going to put this over here. So the various risk factors involved: exposure to carcinogens. Carcinogens are chemicals that can actually change your DNA. So we're talking about asbestos. We're talking about things in tobacco. Genetics is going to play a role as well. If you have a high incidence of cancer in your family, to where you have a high rate of mutation in particular genes, you do want to disclose that to your doctor so they can make certain that they keep an eye on you. Immune suppressed individuals, these people whose immune systems are not so great, you tend to have a higher risk of cancer because their T cells they just don't have a whole lot of them. So they have to, if you have a cell that's forgotten its job and you don't have enough T cells to go and take it out, you tend to see an increase of cancer in especially like elderly people whose immune systems aren't so great, people who have HIV infection. You can have people with autoimmune disorders. They might have, certain ones might have a higher risk for cancer. Viral exposure. Certain viruses can cause cancer. HPV is one of them. HPV we're learning more about. And we have vaccines now. And since we've introduced vaccines for HPV, we have a lower risk of cervical cancer. They're trying to do vaccines for post-exposure to HPV, especially for oral cancers. And so HPV causes oral cancer, anal cancer. It can cause penile cancer, vaginals, but primarily we see it with cervical cancer. But it can cause oral cancer as well. And they're working on tests for men to determine whether or not they have HPV. But that's still, there's nothing new just yet for that. But there are scientists working for a vaccine to help people once they've been exposed to HPV to go and take out any oral cancer. Lifestyle choices can play a role. They can increase your risk. So alcohol intake, diet, tobacco. Alcohol and diet can play a role in affecting your immune system. That's how that can actually play a role. So if you already have an issue with genetics, if you're exposed to carcinogens regularly, or if you smoke a lot, if you're not eating a healthy diet, and if you drink a lot, you're increasing your risk for cancer quite a bit. And so you kind of want to take in, I'm not saying don't ever drink, I'm saying take in the whole picture and understand what all of your risk factors are and make choices based on that. Chronic inflammation, something that we see often with autoimmune disorders, autoimmune diseases. People have a higher risk for cancer for those who suffer from chronic inflammation, and exposure to radiation of any kind. You know, we have Rosalind Franklin, who essentially discovered the helical structure of DNA. She exposed herself to X-ray radiation, which later caused her to develop cancer. And so all of these particular risk factors, I'm not saying don't ever have wine. I'm not saying don't ever, eat that cake. What I'm saying is understand your body. Take in all that you know that's associated with your genetics, what you're exposed to. Talk to your doctor. That's a good conversation to have, especially if your doctor knows your family history, and say, what can I do to lower my risk? If this is something you're concerned about, you may not be concerned about it, and that's okay. So it is important to speak with your doctor if cancer runs in your family, because minimizing environmental factors, such as lifestyle choices, can reduce your risk of developing cancer. Regular screenings and checks are your best bet in catching any of those precancer cells I was talking to you about, to give you the best outcome, and also for treatments. So the next bit here, let's talk about the exciting world of treatments. If my slide will go to the next one. There we go. Now I have to pop over so you can see this really cool thing. All right, so here we have a T cell. Sorry, that's the big monitor. Let me do it this way. I'll just leave myself out altogether so you guys can check out this awesome GIF image right there. So here we have a killer T cell engaging a cancer cell, which is pretty cool. And to be honest, this is the way that they're going for cancer treatments, as it tends to be highly effective, especially in individuals that they were able to do this with. Now, there is surgery, so you may not need some super high-tech version treatment like this if surgery is going to knock it out. So the first course of action is, let's remove it. Let's remove the thing. I don't think it's spread, but let's remove the thing. So they remove the thing. All right, so if the stuff is still showing up a little bit, the next course of action is chemotherapy. And, that they might go through radiation type of treatment as well to try to blast those other cells, depending on the type of cancer. There are certain types of cancers that are resistant to very specific types of chemotherapy and radiation, so they may go through and do what we call a PET scan, like I explained before, to see if this particular cancer is resistant. It's something called hypoxia. And so certain levels of that, of whether or not a cancer cell has a certain amount of oxygen available in it, is going to determine whether or not that particular cancer will respond to specific treatments. So that's one way to kind of rule out, this is not what we're going to do. This is what we're going to go with. But as I mentioned before, new science in vaccines and immunotherapy. So they are working on a vaccine post-HPV exposure to try to combat oral cancer, to kind of work to encourage your immune system to go and attack your oral cancer. And the other thing, immunotherapy, what they're doing right here. So let's talk a bit about that coolness. Wait, I have to switch to here. It's interesting when it's just me, I have to keep up with where I'm going. All right, since we learned in this particular broadcast that cancer is a failure of the immune system to a degree, science has been working on rewiring the immune systems of cancer patients to attack their cancer cells directly with specialized T cells. Let's take a look at some of the earliest forms of this treatment where HIV shell viruses were used to reprogram a child's immune system to attack her cancer. And it worked. So I have this really cool video to show you guys. Let me pull this up if I can find it. It is right here.
Take one.
Is it hard for you to say those words? We're trying to cure cancer. That's a really good question, and why it's hard to say we want to cure cancer. We do. And I think sometimes it's hard actually to think that you might actually succeed.
Patients that we're treating on this clinical trial have absolutely no other options left for them. These are patients who are unfortunately destined to die of their disease, and in a fairly short amount of time.
Emily Whitehead, 554.
So Emma is incredibly matter-of-fact about all of this stuff. This was a child who had had her leukemia come back twice. The parents were looking for a miracle.
What we learned how to do is train the immune system to recognize and then kill tumor cells.
It's a procedure where we collect their T cells, and they are infected with a virus that will genetically change them so that they will now see and react against their leukemia cells.
And we actually use the HIV virus to do that.
So you're taking the HIV virus and infecting healthy cells with it to help kill cancer?
Yes. The virus has been engineered so that it can't cause disease anymore. But it still retains the ability to reprogram the immune system so that it will now attack cancer cells. We call those modified immune cells serial killer cells. Each infused cell can kill more than 1,000 different tumor cells.
But the reality is the dramatic responses of cancer to new treatments are very unusual. We need to make it clear when we talk to a family that it may not work. Emma was given her T-cell treatment, and within a few days, she was very sick. She had breathing difficulties, she had blood pressure difficulties. We knew that she could not have gotten any sicker without actually dying.
But then a remarkable thing happened. The T cells were growing, they were starting to fight the cancer.
Within hours, Emma's fever disappeared.
It was like the calm after the storm. The clouds went away, and she woke up, and there was no leukemia. When that child survived, it was, of course, an amazing event.
Yay! Yay, science! I love that video so much. I get a little choked up. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so awesome. But it's hard, you know? It's hard to not watch that. It's like, oh my god, look at that. But because of that type of research, that's where they're moving now. There's now FDA trials for all kinds of versions of that, of reprogramming. Oh, I'm all choked up. This happens every time I watch that video, guys. I'm so unprofessional right now. But I always showed that to like my high school students when I was teaching, like, look what science did. This kid doesn't have cancer anymore. And they used HIV to do it. Oh my gosh. It's so exciting. So, so the thing is that's the way that they're moving for cancer treatment, is to take people's immune cells, their own immune system, reprogram them, and inject them back into the patients. And then their these new cells will go and attack their cancer. So this is what this is where kind of the future of treatment is moving towards. It's still complicated. They're still trying to iron a lot of the different things, but there are now human trials going on for various types of cancer with that type of treatment. So it's quite amazing. You're like, wow, yay, you know. So hopefully we'll have more stuff associated with that. So these new treatments are being developed throughout clinical trials. Be certain to ask your doctor if you can join these treatments if you have cancer and you qualify. Stay abreast of information on the latest findings in regard to cancer. Take care of yourself. The best way you can lower your risk is by staying educated and doing what you can to take care of you. So, if you want that glass of wine, man, have it. But if you already have other risk factors, understand and take that into consideration so you can make better choices for yourself. It's not about me telling you how to live your life. It's not about anybody else telling you how to live your life. It is about you educating yourself and taking care of yourself, understanding all of the other things and other factors and risk factors in your life and making informed decisions. That's what this is about. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life. I'm not going to tell you, you shouldn't be doing that thing over there, or you should be doing this better. That's not my place. You know you better than I do. And you know, but I just want you to understand how to learn and take information and make informed decisions for yourself. That's what I do. And so I want to make sure I have done that for you today. Oh, God, I'm still all, like, teary-eyed over the other stuff. Freaking, no, you're chopping onions. So, no, you've chopped the onions, not me. That's just chopping onions on the side here. Anyway, so we've talked today about cancer. What is it? We've talked about what it is. We've talked about how it happens, the different types, risk factors, treatments, and prevention. Minimize your risk. Nothing is 100% free. There is no zero risk on anything at all in the world, okay? There's just nothing. But if you educate yourself, you can lower your risk, and that's what it's about. And just if you do have the ability, go and Planned Parenthood. That's one organization that does cancer screenings. So, little bit on politics here. I try not to get too political. But the thing that makes Planned Parenthood so important is that they do cervical cancer screenings. They do breast cancer screenings. Planned Parenthood is so much more than just, birth control and abortion. Abortions are like 3% of what they do. The rest of the time, it's education. It's free screenings for breast cancer, cervical cancer, and other types of cancers. They also give out treatments for these sorts of things. And so keep that in mind. Not everything is so cut and dry. Do your research. Look into a bit of that. And if you can't afford to go to the doctor for screenings for cancer, a lot of organizations offer them for free. And you can do that every year. So take care of yourself. And yes. So this was finally my field. Here are some of my resources. So what I'll do is I'll add more because a lot of what I've talked about in this case, I have professional experience in to a degree as I've done cancer research. So a lot of this is my own knowledge that I've kind of thrown into there. But there is a textbook, Cell Biology. I believe this was edition 5. You can utilize that particular textbook. You can also go on cancer.org, cancer.gov. There's also lots of stuff on NIH, the National Institute of Health. Macmillan.org.uk, they have information on the different types of cancer. You can go to all of these different things, and that video came from GE Life Sciences, so I'm going to throw out a credit there for that particular thing. So I'm going to take a moment to thank my awesome patrons. My Patreon, Paula got jumped up to the top there a bit. I got to fix that. She always ends up on the way top there. So let me fix that a second. Slide her down. There we go. Now you can see her better. So I want to take a moment to thank my patrons, Tony, James, Lauren, Jen, Carl, Melanie, Patrick, Daniel, Stephen, Paula, Tim, Carrie, Cersei, Keith, Duke, James, Zachary, Tony, Bo, Stephen, Sarah, Graham, Dragnot, Godless Iowan, Jennifer, Corey, and Heavy. My pledges just started $1 a month. I now have a new show on Sundays called Science Sunday School. to where I talk about the latest information and the newest findings in science. Last week, it was a little bit about artificial photosynthesis. We also talked about veggie burgers that taste like beef. And we also talk a bit about sucking carbon dioxide out of the air. Oh, gosh. It's okay, Owen. It's okay if you can't afford to be a patron. It's all right. I completely understand. So CERN has something new for surgeons so they could see better the border between healthy and cancer cells and be able to do a precise cut. It's called translational imaging mass spec. Oh, I will have to look that up. That sounds cool. So thank you to my patrons. They help me keep the lights on. And if you can't contribute, there's other things you can do. Just get the word out. And I'm trying to get to 4,000 viewed hours on my YouTube. So if you can't afford to be a patron, that's all right. Just get the word out and just watch my shows. Just watch my shows. Have them in the background, because once I reach 4,000 viewing hours, then YouTube can monetize my channel and help me get a little bit more money in to kind of help pay to do what I do. Because I offer everything for free. So if you can't contribute to my Patreon, that's okay. Just watch my stuff. Just watch my stuff and share the joy of science. That's what I like to do. It's like one of my favorite things. I love being here every Saturday morning with you guys. This means a lot to me. All right, so where can you find me? Everywhere on the internet. ScientistMel.com, Patreon, Periscope, YouTube, Facebook. I'm also on Twitch now. I have my own Discord, so if you want to interact with me there, you can do that. You can join my Discord and talk to me there. So there's all kinds of stuff and ways to communicate with me. If you want access to my slides, go to ScientistMel.com. All of my stuff is there. Teachers, you can use my videos and my resources. I recently joined a group in National Geographic called Women of Impact, and I'm actively sharing my stuff there for women who are teachers as well. So that's a cool thing that's going on. Hope to see how that goes. And that has been the science of cancer cells. If you have any questions, use my hashtag HeyScientistMel on Twitter. You can ask me on Discord under Ask a Scientist. You can then also interact with me there. You can hit me up on Twitch. You can also hit me up on my website. I have a contact form there to where you can directly email me. Ask me questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. And, I am available to come to classrooms. I can Skype in. I can do all kinds of stuff. You need to start watching me on 2 devices at once. Then does that actually work there? I don't know if that works on YouTube, but what you can do is play me in the background if you're doing spring cleaning right now. You can play, all of my YouTube videos are organized by playlists. So you can just find a playlist and it goes through all of them together. I'm all over the place and I'm here for you. And I'm also on Facebook.com/ScientistMel. And so they've been on here watching too. Oh, I'm so glad you're here, Colin. And I'm glad you guys are spending Saturday morning science with me every Saturday. And I'll have a new poll up for the next set of topics. So if you have an idea that you want me to talk about on the show, go for it. Shoot me a message, ask me on Twitter, and then I'll incorporate it into the polls, and those go up every week. I picked cancer this week because it's like almost tied every single week for about a month. And so I kind of usually am like, okay, let's give the second place a first place this week. And so I kind of do that because, cancer is an important topic too, and we kind of need to understand that. And plus, that was my field. So I find it interesting for over a year. It's been other things, and then now I get to talk about cancer. So, but it has been awesome to have you guys here. I am starting back on the live stream, Hey Scientist Mel 24/7. I'm working on that tomorrow because I'm incorporating other science communicators. I'm going to have Jackson Wheat stuff on there. I'm going to have some stuff from Stephen Gray. And PZ Myers said I can use any video that he has. So there's going to be PZ Myers stuff on there. If you know a science communicator that wants promotion on my channel, send them my way. All I need is permission to get their videos and put them on my live stream. Then I'll have my 24/7 live stream where you can watch and all of your comments will pop up on the side just as before, kind of like this. And then I pop in from time to time. And if you have questions during that 24/7 live stream, you can ask me on my Discord if you want, or you can say something in the comments for that particular thing. And I'll have a list of what the lineup is, so you'll know what to expect. You'll know what you're looking at, and you'll kind of know where it is in that particular live stream. It's all pre-recorded stuff. It's all pre-recorded, but it's kind of like a constant television station showing all the things science that you can just pop on your background while you're at work or something. Oh, you're a patron now. Hey, Andy. Well, thank you, Andy. I'm so glad you're here. So if you have any questions about cancer or anything otherwise, or if there's a topic that you want me to talk about that I haven't done today, hit me up on any of the places that I mentioned before. And that's Saturday Science. We don't have Saturday morning cartoons anymore, but that's okay. We have Saturday Science now, every morning, 10 a.m. Central Time. So you guys have an awesome Saturday. I'm going to go watch Jurassic World later on, and I'll let you know how wrong it is scientifically. But it's still Jurassic World, and Jeff Goldblum and all. Hey, that'll be fun. So have a super, super awesome Saturday. And patrons, I will see you for Science Sunday School tomorrow, 3 p.m. Central Time. Sending hugs. Thank you for being here.